So, as usual, got to put on the readers here. We got to get serious. We got to get the book out. This is the book. It's the third one in the series and the final one of the series, so I'm going to miss reading these books with y'all and sharing the fine points. Don't Give Me Butterflies by Tara Sheets, and look at how many points of light I want to share with you. So, let's read the back, and then we'll go from there. Pine Cove Island calls to her soul. As the queen of impulsive decisions, Kat Davenport has found herself without a job or place to live, so settling on Pine Cove Island isn't the sanest choice, meaning it's perfect. Like the mysterious Holloway cousins, Kat has her own unique gift, but in her case it's a knack for communicating with animals, which makes getting hired at a local animal shelter feel like kismet, especially when she finds a room to rent nearby Lavender Farm, completely with a sweet landlord and a brawny grandson and a guy who happens to give Kat an all too familiar flutter in her stomach. Now, Jordan Prescott isn't back in Pine Cove to find romance. He's here to sell his family farm, a fact that bewilders Kat, a former foster kid. She can't understand why he'd give up his childhood home when the big-hearted beauty starts bringing home strays from the shelter. Jordan is suddenly her adversary, until their fiery disagreements turn into fiery kisses. Now Kat is falling for a man who will likely make her homeless yet again, unless she learns how to lend a considerable power to taming the beast lurking inside this prince. Okay, and it says on the cover, can animal attraction lead me to true love? Which, it was odd that Don't Touch My Petunia didn't have anything on the cover, but that one does. Okay, so they give us a little introduction, so we'll start there. Maybe. When you put all these paper clips in there, it's a lot harder to hold the book. Just saying. He lazily braced his hands on the shelf behind her head. You're telling me that you're willingly going to ignore my request? Yep. I'm so glad you said that. She glanced up sharply. Why? Because it's settled, and now we can go with your idea. In one swift move, Jordan leaned down and brushed his lips over hers. Kat stood frozen in that moment, aware of nothing but the warm, soft caress of his mouth, the rasp of his flannel shirt against her bare arms, the crisp scent of the pine soap and warm male skin. His kiss was subtle yet insistent, coaxing, intoxicating. Heat bloomed inside her, spiraling out of every direction, and like a sensual drug too powerful to resist. She slid her hands around his neck and pressed closer. This was madness. She knew it, but she couldn't bring herself to care. All the rational thoughts seemed to slip away like wispy clouds on a stiff breeze, until the only things that were left, hot, bright taste of him and feel of his powerful arms around her, and the thudding beat of her heart. In that moment, only thing that was achingly clear, though, is Jordan Prescott knew how to kiss. Okay, we're moving forward. Again, it's called Don't Give Me Butterflies, Chapter 1. Kat Davenport was many things, but wealthy wasn't one of them. After plunking down her last $20 at the store that morning for dog food, Cheetos, and shampoo, she vowed to take whatever job came her way, no matter what it was. Beggars can't be choosers, she told her dog, Hank, as they left the motel room that afternoon, and anything's better than being hungry and homeless. But now, she yanked on the ridiculous yellow chicken costume and prepared to stand in the sweltering August heat at the Pine Cove Island Farmers Market. The life of a hobo wasn't looking all that bad. Your beak's broken, her supervisor said in a voice like a fine-gripped sandpaper. Kat glanced at the woman lounging on the single fold-out chair inside the booth. Smitty Bankston was on the hard side of 60 and with a sour expression that said she knew it. Deep lines etched into her face, and her hair was teased and sprayed into a frothy style that she'd seen better days and wanted to go back. Your chicken beak, Smitty said. It's all crunched up. She took a long drag on her cigarette and flicked the ashes into the grass. And my nose is itching, kids. Page 2. Kat blinked through the fumes. I'll figure something out. If she learned one thing in her 26 years, it was how to improvise. She zipped the feathered costume up to her neck. The chicken head was stuffed hood that snapped under her chin, but the plastic beak was crushed beyond repair. Just wear it without the beak so your face shows, Minnie said, exhaling another plume of smoke. That way people can hear you better when you ask for donations. Great! Kat tucked her frizzing red hair into the kitchen, into the chicken hood, wondering how it all came to this. When she saw the ad for a one-a-day job working with Daisy Meadows Pet Rescue, she jumped at the chance. Animals were her specialty. She was born with a magical ability to communicate with them, and she always taken jobs involving animals, but this wasn't the cakewalk she expected. It was more like a pie in the face. Here's your baskets, Minnie said, handing her a pink basket with the words, "Please pause for your donations" on the side and "Thank you very much" on the other. Now get out of here and work the crowd. 37 minutes later, because she was counting, Kat had exactly $0 in donations. The afternoon was brutal, and the costumes shaped her in all the worst places. She wandered past the vegetable stands, candle makers, and flower booths, trying to make eye contact with people. "Big bird," a small child said, pointing at her. "No, honey." His mother gave Kat a tight smile, then pulled him away. "That's something else." A baby in a stroller stared at Kat with wide eyes and started to howl. Kat hurried past as fast as the children's feet would allow, and the gig going on the worst job ever list was no question that she felt like one of those costumed scam artists wandering Times Square in New York City. A crazy person would pause and donate. An old man with a cane hobbled over and tossed a quarter in the basket. "Shake those tail feathers, Bessie." He wiggled his bushy eyebrows and grinned. Kate glanced at the single coin. How had she fallen this low? Oh, yeah, because she was the queen of impulsive decisions. 3 weeks ago she was working as a pet sitter on the Hollywood Houseboat, a reality show from Southern California. Then on a crazy whim, she decided to stay in North Pacific for the good. Pine Cove Island was as far away from the drama of L.A. and therefore blissful, but now her bank account was empty, and there was nothing blissful about that. She shoved a sweaty lock of her hair away from her face and pushed on through the crowd. On her second lap around the market, Kat had no further donations to show for her efforts. Fed up with needing a break from the sun, she made a beeline toward the shady spot underneath a large tree. A white farmer's tent filled the bundles of lavender stood beside it, but no one was there. She plopped down on a bale of hay underneath the tree, then yanked off her chicken hood and shook her hair. A sudden gust of wind kicked up, and the fresh scent of lavender soothed her heated emotions. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, trying to embrace the moment. She needed to find her zen, or whatever it was called, but she needed to find a permanent job in a place that actually felt like home. A hollow ache settled inside her chest. It was a place that even like that existed. Leaning forward, Kat dropped her face into her hands. Zen. She managed her temples with her fingers. Massage. I can't read tonight. I'm sorry, kids. I'm telling you honestly. Trying to quiet her mind, but it didn't work. It was like asking a tornado to stop spinning. Zen harder. She tried for several. That was page 2, 3, and 4. More seconds, then she let out a heavy sigh. It was no use. Maybe she could hang out there in the shade for an extra hour or 5. "Excuse me," a deep voice said behind her. "I believe you're sitting on my lunch." Kat spun around, or at least she tried. The costume's bulk made it difficult to maneuver. Her spiky tail feathers swished in an arc, sending her donation basket, a paper plate, and a sandwich flying into the grass. "Oh!" She scrambled for the crushed sandwich and plate, setting them back on the bale of hay. Then she glanced up to apologize, but the words died in her throat. The man loomed over her like a thundercloud, with broad shoulders, deeply tanned skin, and dark hair. He wore black jeans and a charcoal gray t-shirt, and he was so tall. Kat took an involuntary step back. "I'm sorry," she managed. "I didn't notice your sandwich. It was a stupid costume. I can't even see my feet." His gaze swept over her slowly. She tried to appear calm and unfazed, but it wasn't easy. He was one of those gorgeous by accident type of people. The kind who didn't have to try. Not like the carefully groomed pretty boys she worked with in L.A. Certainly not like her ex-boyfriend, who had more clothes and hair products than she did. Nothing like about this man was soft or pretty. He was sharp, masculine features, unusual amber eyes, and a thin scar across his left cheekbone. He was in need of a haircut, and his face was unshaven, which, paired with the scar, made him look like some wicked character from a fairy tale. The beast, Kat decided. He reminded her of the dark prince who got turned into a beast because of his wicked ways. His mouth curved into an almost smile, and fluttering sensation began in the pit of Kat's stomach. Okay. Page 6 and 7. But why did I mark 6? I don't like when I do that. I've got to stop doing that part. Okay. She's telling him that she's dressed like a chicken. He thought that she was dressed like a turkey. No, she threw him a look as if he was ridiculous, and then jammed on her feather hood. It was a rescue facility for animals, mostly cat and dogs. I'm a chicken, if you must know. Ah, he nodded solemnly, but she had a distinct feeling that he was laughing at her. I see that now. She took a deep breath and let it out fast. I know it's dumb, all right. Just give me 5 seconds. I'll be off to terrorize small children and leave you in peace. He shrugged. Take your time. I like chickens. He looped his thumbs through his pockets of his jeans and glanced up at the crumbled plate. My sandwich was chicken. She tried to snap the hood shut underneath her chin. The clasp wouldn't catch, and she tried again, muttering underneath her breath. He pushed off the tree and stepped closer. Do you need some help? No, she said quickly. If he had to help her, humiliation would be complete. Why wouldn't he just go away? He kept watching as she fumbled with the clasp under her chin. Spiky feathers poked her neck, brushed against her nose, scraped against her collarbone. She bit the inside of her cheeks. Frustration was mounting with every second. Maybe you should consider an easier costume next time. She almost laughed. There wasn't going to be a, quote, next time, end quote. Even if it meant she had to pack up a bundle stick and go moseying down the train tracks with her dog Hank. A prickly feather jabbed her ear. She plucked the offending feather out, tossed it to the ground, and continued trying to snap the hood. You could try a flamingo costume, he said amiably, and another feather dug into her temple. She shoved it back. Sweat trickled between her shoulder blades. Her arms ached. Everything itched. Or an albatross, he suggested. You know, something that really says cat and dog shelter. Cat slapped feathers away from her face. It was too much. She was fed up with this job. The day, her life. Look, she pierced him with a glare, fighting to steady her voice. I get that I might be entertaining to you, but it's no picnic for me. I took this gig because I needed the money. I'm supposed to be collecting donations. So far, all I've gathered is 25 cents and an old man who told me to shake my tail feathers. So just give me a break, okay? This is not my idea of a fun afternoon. She turned back on him, and still grappling with the hood clasp, and after several moments in which she considered ripping the hood off, dousing it with gasoline, and lighting it on fire with one of Smitty's cigarettes, it finally snapped closed. Hallelujah! Now she could finally get on with her glorious day. What is? He asked. She spun to face him, plucking a downy feather from her mouth. What is what? He was studying her with those whiskey-colored eyes, his head cocked to one side like he was figuring out a puzzle. A dark lock of his hair fell over his brow, and Kat was struck again by how attractive he was, or would be, if she was into those wild, wicked beast type, which she wasn't. The butterflies in her stomach started to say otherwise, and she drew out a mental fly swatter and shut them up fast. What is your idea of a fun afternoon? He asked. Kat blinked. It had to be a long time since anyone asked her opinion on something like that. There were so many ways to answer that question. She'd rather be almost anywhere right now, like on a beach or an outdoor music concert or sidewalk cafe. She'd rather be curled up with her dog watching an old black and white movie or browsing thrift stores for treasures that nobody wanted. But none of those things seemed particularly interesting to someone who looked like he roamed the halls of enchanted castles and slayed dragons in his spare time. Instead, she just shrugged. I don't know, watching movies, shopping. His expression faded to a look of mild boredom. Of course. Kat bristled. His dismissive tone bothered her. He bothered her. She lifted her chin. Oh, is that not exciting enough for you? He lifted his hands. Hey, whatever floats your boat. Not everyone has the same idea of fun, that's all. Y'are who y'are. She pressed her lips together. He had no idea who she was. Well, What's your idea of a fun afternoon? Swimming with the sharks, jumping off cliffs in a wingsuit? His lips twitched. He ran a hand through his hair and looked away. Kat couldn't help but notice his muscular arms and how broad his shoulders were in comparison to his lean hips. He was built like a professional athlete. Maybe he really did do extreme sports. Nothing that complicated, he said, turning back to her. A soft smile played at the corners of his mouth. Sometimes I just like to hang out and enjoy lunch with the friends, or he glanced at her. He flicked a gaze to her costume and then back up to her face. A hot chick. Kat rolled her eyes. She grabbed her basket and marched away, tail feathers bouncing with each step. A deep masculine chuckle followed until she lost herself in the crowd. She was on the other side of the farmer's market before she looked in her basket. On the bottom was folded a $20 bill. That was page 789. Okay, page 13. Mr. Tall, Dark, and Bothersome stood on the threshold. He was younger than she first assumed, maybe in his late 20s or 30s. His hair was damp and smooth back, and he was clean shaven, so the angles of his face were more clearly defined. He wore jeans and an unbuttoned flannel shirt, revealing a glimpse of muscled torso and tanned skin. Kat thought he'd been attractive before, but now he looked downright sinful. His gaze traveled over her hair, her clothes, her shoes. She shifted self-consciously on her feet. She was wearing an old tank top, shorts, and chunky boots. All her clothes were black, which was a requirement for her last job, as working as part of a crew on a houseboat, so she hadn't had the money or the time to buy new clothes yet. Now, under his scrutiny, she felt more inappropriately dressed, which was absurd, considering he barely had on a shirt. "I didn't expect to see you here," she blurted. He lifted a dark brow. "Sorry to disappoint you." "I'm not," she said quickly, but it wasn't entirely true. She expected a wizened old farmer in overalls with a grandpa smile, or maybe a little old lady in an apron with lots of cats, someone sweet and comforting. This man was the exact opposite. He gave her an unsettling butterflies in her stomach feeling. Kat cleared her throat and tried to sound calm, even though she wasn't. "I just didn't expect... you don't seem like a Lavender Farm type of person." His expression flickered with bitter amusement. "I won't argue with that." He began buttoning his shirt. "You're early." Kat glanced away, watching him feel almost intimate, as if she was watching him undress. I was supposed to come at noon, right?" She pulled her phone from her pocket and checked the time. 11:40. She must have rushed through the morning in her eagerness to see the room. "I didn't realize how early it was. Do you want me to come back in 20 minutes? "No need," he finished, buttoning his shirt and held out a hand. "I'm Jordan Prescott." Kat Davenport. She reached out to shake his hand. It was a very simple, everyday gesture, but sudden skin-on-skin contact made her hyper-aware of how big and warm he was and how close they were standing, so she quickly let go. "I thought I was meeting an Prescott." "My grandmother, Opal," Jordan said. "I posted the ad for her." "You live with your grandmother?" Another oddity. He looked away. "Not for long." That was page 13 and 14. Looks like we're going all the way to page 16. Kat suddenly wondered what his story was. Everybody had a story. Some people got the happy Hallmark Channel ones with the parents and the family traditions and the fresh-baked cookies after school. Other people got les miserables. But that's what made them resourceful and self-sufficient and strong. That's what made them capable of handling whatever life threw their way. She squared her shoulders and lifted her chin. Is your grandmother here?" "No, she's at the community center playing bingo, or knitting." He shook his head in dismal. "Whatever it is, she'll be back by 12. Kat nodded in relief. The little old lady who knitted and played bingo made sense. That was the kind of landlord she expected. A sinfully attractive, slightly annoying grandson wasn't part of the plan, but Kat wasn't going to let that stop her. She needed a room, and it was cheap, which was her favorite price, and she had no problem taking care of animals. She had to make this work. Besides, he wasn't going to be there for long. "I'm heading out," Jordan's sultry female voice said from down the hall. A pretty woman in a red suit, mile-high stilettos, sauntered up beside him. She had a sleek, dark hair and lips painted the exact shade of her dress. "Who's this?" "Kat Davenport. She's here for the room for rent," Jordan said. "Ms. Davenport, this is Layla Gentry." "Oh, that's right," Layla mused. "The room above the garage. I forgot about that." She swept Kat from head to toe in an appraisal as though Kat felt like she was on an auction block. Apparently Layla decided she wasn't worth the investment, because she tipped her head in a brief acknowledgement, then promptly dismissed her. Layla placed a hand on Jordan's upper arm and squeezed. "I have to run. Come by my office later." She brushed past Kat and sailed away on a river of Chanel No. 5. "Does she live here too?" Kat asked. "No, she was just doing some work for me." Kat wasn't going to ask what kind of work. It wasn't any of her business. He could do whatever he wanted with as many females as he wanted. All she cared about was having a convenient place to live. "Come in." Jordan stood back and waved her into the house. "I'll show you around." Kat paused in the doorway. It was dark in the hall except for a splash of sunlight from the window on the upstairs landing. She stole a glance at Jordan Prescott, her potential new roommate. He was standing half in the shadow, an errant sunbeam slanted across his face, which made his eyes appear even brighter and more golden than usual. "Are you coming in, or—" She hesitated for a few heartbeats. His expression was lit with amusement, and his mouth curved into a smile. It wasn't the sweet, comforting kind of smile one would expect from grandpa farmers and little old cat ladies. It was enchanted, wicked prince smile, the kind that would lure a woman into all sorts of delicious trouble if she were willing. "Chickening out?" he said softly. Kat narrowed her eyes. She could think of several good reasons why she'd better be off with the different living arrangements, but this queen of impulsive decisions just tossed her hair, stepped into the threshold, and followed the beast into his lair. Page 19. Kat walked into the kitchen, glancing around. "It's nice." He felt a twinge of guilt. The house he'd grown up in was anything but nice. When his parents lived there, it was a perpetual mess and always in need of repairs. Sometimes there was no heat or electricity, because they didn't pay the bills. If it was always cold in the winter, he remembered, always chaotic. And now that they left the place, it was even more run down. They'd been gone over a month before his mother just thought to send him a hastily scrawled postcard from Malaysia with the news that they've decided to retire there. "A new adventure," she written. "The house is yours, grandmother, if you want it. We won't be returning." Okay. I hate when I do this, when I don't mark. Why did I mark it? Well, we're just going to keep reading until... Okay, Jordan ran a hand over the sudden tension on the back of his neck. Once again, he had to clean up their mess, but this wouldn't be the last time. All he had to do was fix the place up, make it look presentable enough to sell, and that was the plan. He watched Kat run her hand over the kitchen counter, and as if in deep thought. She probably didn't like the idea of sharing a kitchen with strangers. He couldn't blame her. He didn't like it much either. Back in Manhattan, he valued his hard-won privacy. The apartment, his driver, even his acquaintances, and the women he dated were all kept at a safe distance, exactly where he liked them. Living here for the next couple of months with his grandmother and potentially Kat was going to be disturbing in more ways than one he cared to admit. "We don't usually do much cooking in here, but you're free to use anything you find." Kat leaned against the counter and crossed her arms. "You don't cook at all?" "Not if I can help it." "So if you're a cereal for dinner kind of guy then, huh?" "Please, I'm not an amateur." He walked over to the fridge, opened the freezer, and pointed. Several frozen waffle boxes were stacked inside. Her soft laugh did something to his insides, spreading over the hard places and seeping into the cracks he didn't know were there. He didn't like it. Jordan shut the freezer and quickly led her outside. Weeds had taken over the lawn, and grass was out of control. That was too long to mow. The rose bushes along the fence were growing like wild things, all thorns, red blooms, no rhyme or reason to any of it. "Beautiful," Kat said, stopping to touch one of the red roses. Jordan squinted at the overgrown mess of flowers. The bushes were exactly the same as he remembered, growing up, ignored and abandoned, no one taking care of them in years. "I'm surprised they're still even alive." Kat shrugged. "They're just needing some pruning." He frowned and kept walking. Certain rose bushes would need a bit more work than that. The entire yard looked like a scene from the apocalypse film. It shouldn't have bothered him, but for some reason, now that she was there, it did. He led her through the weeds to the garage, then up a narrow staircase to the room above it. The studio was large and spacious, which was the only decent thing about it. Everything else was dreary. It had a scratched table with a single chair pushed against the far wall. Above it a bare window that overlooked the front yard. The only other piece of furniture in the room was an ancient, lumpy recliner chair. Kat was quiet as she roamed the room and peeked into the small bathroom. Then she moved the table and looked outside the window. She began shaking her head. Jordan felt a sharp stab of disappointment. He took a deep breath and let it out quickly. So the room wasn't what she expected. He should have known. She was going to turn it down, and so be it. Could he blame her? The place was about as inviting as a jail cell. Utilitarian, drab, musty. Someone like her belonged in a place full of color and light. Steeling himself, he walked to the door and pulled it open. It was no matter. He run the ad again for his grandmother. Someone else could tend to the animals for the time being. She turned to him, biting her lip. He gestured to the open door. "It's nice," she said. "This will work great." That was page 21, and here's 22. Jordan blinked as she passed him to the head down the stairs. She surprised him again. Back outside, he pointed to a gray barn inside the fenced paddock beyond the garden. "The animals?" Kat asked. He nodded. "What's in the red barn over there?" She pointed across the yard to the paddock barn. "Nothing important," he said dismissively, certain nothing that he wanted to talk about. "Do you want to meet the animals or not?" Kat lifted the delicate brow. "Sure." She charged ahead, calling over her shoulder. "You won't have to worry about a thing. Animals are my specialty. It'll be easy." Jordan watched her go, distracted by the feminine curve of her hips and the sway of her gait as she marched toward the barn in those tiny black shorts and combat boots. He had the feeling that nothing about Cabin Davenport living there was going to be easy. Chapter 3. The barn was dry, warm enough, but happiness didn't live there. Kat had felt it the moment she stepped inside. An all-encompassing melancholy enveloped her, smothering her like a wet cloak. She usually had no problem understanding what animals needed, and this was no exception. Even before she met them, she could tell that they were neglected and needed attention. The barn was the size of a large tool shed. There was one small stall and a pile of old hay in the corner. 3 scrawny white chickens pecked at the ground, scattering when she stepped inside. A scuffling noise came from the back stall, and Cat, waited patiently. A few moments later, a small, furry head peeked around the stall entrance. "There you are," Kat murmured. "I'm so glad to meet you." A miniature donkey blinked his long eyelashes and made a snuffing sound. He was fuzzy and gray, with a velvety nose and black tufts on his ear. "Aren't you a beautiful one?" Kat crooned. She approached slowly, kneeling in front of him and murmuring. Page 24. Things that made no sense, things that were even a part of the language. They were just soothing noises instinctively known how to make to put an animal at ease. A mini donkey approached her cautiously, then all at once rubbing his head against her outstretched hands. The connection was instant. Glimpses of his daily life flashed through Kat's mind like scene snippets from a movie reel. Long, dull days in a pen. No one around to keep him company except chickens. Boredom. Kat smiled and scratched him lovingly behind the ears. "You're all right, aren't you? You just need a friend. We'll get you one, I promise. Things are going to get much better around here. Don't you worry." She rose from the ground and made her way to the chickens, only vaguely aware that Jordan was watching her from the doorway. The tiny donkey followed behind her. Kat knelt close to the chickens and waited. They clucked and shifted nervously, ruffling their feathers, strutting just out of reach. Soon they got bold, and within moments Kat was petting them, searching for that thread of communication she always had with animals. A quick image flashed through her mind, the chickens warm and snug in their old coop. She soon understood exactly what they needed. They were nervous, she said aloud. They missed their old house where they felt safe. Jordan pushed off the wall where he'd been leaning and came to stand next to her. The chickens scattered out of reach. "How did you know?" he asked. "The old chicken coop broke apart in a storm a while back." "Chickens need a safe place to roost at night," Kat said, carefully making sure only to say things a normal person would know. "A place to keep them away from predators." "I didn't even know we had chickens until a week ago. My grandmother said they'd all been lost in the storm, but she'd been leaving food out just in case. These 3 are the only ones left." Hold on. We are having a paperclip malfunction. Okay. "Can you build them a coop today? I can help. They're very unhappy." He gave her an odd look, but she was used to it. People had been giving her that look her whole life, but speaking up on the behalf of animals was something Kat felt compelled to do, even if it meant making herself vulnerable to other people's scrutiny and judgment. "I'll see what I can do," Jordan said. "Good!" Kat stood and slapped dust off her hands. "I'll have them all happy again in no time, I promise." Jordan walked with her to the front yard. He was quiet on the way, and Kat wondered what he was thinking. Maybe he thought she was a weirdo with animal stuff. But she was pretty sure that she hadn't done anything too crazy. It's not like she hugged the chicken or anything, which she totally planned on doing as soon as she got the chance. Chickens were simple creatures, and they felt comfort. Some of them actually liked being held. Near the porch steps, Jordan stopped. He studied her from beneath thick, sooty lashes. Why did men always get the best eyelashes? So unfair. She fidgeted with the hem of her top, hoping she hadn't blown it when the animal was whispering. A small white bus pulled into the yard, and Kat was grateful for the distraction. "My grandmother's back," Jordan said. "Come, I'll introduce you." She followed him across the yard as a tiny old woman in a purple velour jogging suit stepped off the bus and waved goodbye to the driver. Her white, wispy curls were so thin her pink scalp showed through, and her face was a road map of wrinkles, but her eyes were a sharp, clear blue. She saw Kat and broke into a grin. Page 26. "You must be Kat Davenport. I'm so sorry I was late to meet you." She bustled over to meet them, relying on a gray cane she gripped in her one hand. "And it's Milton Johnson's fault. I'm late as usual. He insists on calling bingo letters, but he takes forever. I think he does it on purpose. It's the only time he gets that kind of rapt attention from so many people." She stopped in front of Kat and let out a little breath. "Well, look at you. You're just gorgeous. I wasn't expecting a beauty queen to answer my ad, but we'll just have to bear with it as best as we can, won't we, Jordan?" She jabbed him with an elbow and laughed. A small crease formed between his brows. "Well, isn't this fun?" Opal continued. "I'm looking forward to having another person around to talk to. I'll tell you that much. Has my grandson showed you around?" "Yes," Kat said. "It's all very nice. Oh, pfft," Opal interrupted. "It's not nice here. It's abysmal. My cotton-headed son and his wife had no business trying to run a farm, which is why I moved in last year, just to help 'em out. But they didn't listen to me about anything. No. The only reason the lavender farm is still thriving is because it's stubborn like my grandson here." She tilted her head toward Jordan. "But his parents weren't any good at taking much care. And now look." She pointed to the overgrown yard. "Everything's a mess. But Jordan's here now, and he's going to save everything, won't you?" she asked him. Jordan didn't answer, but Opal seemed to notice. To Kat she said, "Jordan was always the reliable, light kind, even when he was a little boy. You can count on him." Kat didn't miss the look of resignation that ghosted across Jordan's face. "Is your room okay?" Opal asked as they walked toward the farmhouse. "I haven't been up to that room in years, so on account of my leg trouble. But Jordan assures me that it's all in working order." Her hurried pace was slightly uneven, and Kat had to slow her steps to match. "Oh, I like the room very much," Kat said, "and I'll take good care of the animals." "Good," Opal said. "They'll be so much happier now." They chatted for a few more minutes, and Kat answered Opal's questions about where she came from and what line of work she was in. Kat glossed over her answers with expert precision, like she always did. It was just easier than having to explain the real way she grew up. Any time Kat said the words foster kid, she got that look of pity she'd grown to hate. The whole time Opal talked, Jordan remained quiet. Kat risked a glance at him and wished she hadn't. He looked at her in mild amusement, as if he knew half of her answers were contrived, and as if he knew her secrets. "Come in for some tea," Opal said. "We have molasses cookies." Kat made a slow checking of her phone. "I'd love to, but I have to get going. I have some packing to do, and I'm meeting a friend later." Jordan held his grandmother's elbow to help her up the steps. Opal waved him away. "I can do it myself, boy. I'm not that invalid," using her cane as she slowly, methodically ascended the steps. On the porch, she turned back to Kat. "It's settled then. You'll stay, and I'll see you soon." Kat watched as Opal disappeared into the house. Jordan shook his head. "She does that a lot." "What?" She says things like they're decided, even though they aren't. Pay no attention. Just let me know later today if you think it over. That was page 27. We're going to go 28, 29, 30, 31, and 34. So stay with me. "I don't need to think it over," Kat said quickly. "I'll take it." She jammed her hands into her pockets. "I mean, if you want me." An odd expression went across his face. He cleared his throat. "Opal seems to think this arrangement is a good idea, but it's important that you know it's not permanent. A familiar disappointment settled over her. Of course it wasn't going to be permanent. Nothing ever was, at least not for her, but she hoped she could rent the place long enough to get on her feet. I did think I was planning to live here forever, she said flippantly. Of course it's not permanent, although, now that you mention it, we could discuss the terms of the lease. Month to month, I'll email the paperwork. Kat nodded with a sinking feeling. Month-to-month lease. That wasn't very promising. She hoped it would be a longer term. Then again, she had no other alternative. If nothing else, she would have a solid month to save some money aside if she was lucky, and she'd have even longer. After they said goodbye, she made her way to the car, determined to look on the bright side. Everything was falling into place. Maybe moving to the island was going to be the best decision she ever made. Maybe this would be a place she could fit in and just be herself. When she neared the car, a dark shadow swooped past her head again with a joyful caw. Kat glanced up at the black crow making lazy circles in the clear blue sky. "Edgar," she called. "I've been wondering when you'd find me." Edgar, the crow, fluttered down and landed on a low tree branch. "I know what you want," she teased, reaching up to stroke his glossy feathers. He preened, happy for attention, then shifted on his feet excitedly. She opened her car and dug through her tote bag on the passenger seat. She lifted an unshelled peanut from the small plastic bag, and when she first arrived on the island she absently tossed one of her Cheetos, and for Edgar it was the love at first sight. Ever since that moment he followed her around town. Kat usually kept treats in her bag just for him. He was more prevalent in the last book, Don't Touch My Petunias, just so you know. When she walked back to the tree, Edgar flapped his wings and lifted off his branch and settled on her shoulder. She laughed. "You're such a sucker for gourmet meal. We're two peas in a pod, you and I." She spoke quietly to him for a few moments, then handed him a peanut. He took it and launched into the sky. She waved as he flew away, even though it was a silly gesture. Edgar was a wild bird, but she still thought of him as a friend. To any normal person, the whole exchange would probably seem odd. On the impulse, she glanced back at the farmhouse and froze. Jordan was standing on the porch watching her. He was far enough away that he could see his expression, which was probably a good thing. Did he see her talking to Edgar? How weird did she look? Was it too much? The last thing she needed was to be rejected from her new living arrangement before she even had a chance to move in. Kat got into her car, turned on the engine, pulled into the main road. She gripped the steering wheel and exhaled in frustration. If Jordan thought she was odd, he'd be 150% right, but she made the decision just to be herself from now on, and she wasn't going to try to fit into any mold. So yeah, she talked to birds and other animals. That's who she was. She peered in the rearview mirror at the lavender farm as she drove away. Then she lifted her chin in resolve. Like it or not, Jordan Prescott, this is who I am. She tossed her hair back. Get used to it. Page 31's a short little paragraph. Kat felt a surge of warmth for her friend. From the moment that they met at the beginning of the summer, she felt like they were kindred spirits. The rumor on the island was Juliet Holloway had magical green thumb, along with her cousin Emma, who baked wishes into her cupcakes. One of the reasons Kat wanted to stay on the island was her curiosity about these unusual women who seemed to have strange abilities like her. She hadn't discussed her connection to animals with them yet, but that was the beauty of their friendship. Both of the Holloway girls seemed willing to accept her exactly the way she was. No question asked. Okay, page 34 is a small paragraph. Kat waved goodbye to Romero and followed Juliet outside with Hank trotting along her heels. As they made their way to the pizza parlor near Front Street, Kat thought of Jordan standing on the porch at the farmhouse. He didn't seem to fit in there with his grandmother. Something felt off about it. He seemed restless and casually detached when he showed her around. Mr. Mysterious indeed. She'd be moving in tomorrow. Whatever his story was, she was about to find out. Okay. Oh, good. Page 38 is another short paragraph. Okay. Bobby, my scruffy dog of a nephew who lives on the other side of the island. He visits me on and off, though not nearly enough as he promises he will. Smitty's normally sour expression softened. He can be a royal pain in the behind. But that my family is family, right? Kat said. She wouldn't know, but it was easier than explaining she had no idea who her real family was. Foster care just wasn't for animals. At 5 o'clock that evening she scratched the tired tabby between the ears before leaving, vowing to find her a good home. Not everyone had a chance to start a life in a happy place. Kat hadn't. She'd grown up in the system, moving every few years from a different foster home. It wasn't ideal, but she always believed she'd find the right place to belong. One of these days she'd do it too, but until that time came for herself, she'd help others, like Clementine the cat. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, we're going to go through to page 44, starting on page 41. I saw the new chicken coop, Kat said warmly. You built it today, didn't you? Jordan ran a hand across the back of his neck. Yes, but only because someone told me it had to happen right away because... What was it? He made a show of searching the ceiling, trying to remember. Oh, yes, the chickens felt sad and unsafe. When he looked back at her, there was a mischievous glint in his eyes that made her whole body flush with heat. She had to glance away for a moment to gather her scattered thoughts. Pressing her lips together, she tried not to smile. You're teasing me just to get a rise out of me, aren't you? Yes, he leaned against the door frame and grinned. Is it working? Oh, it was working all right, just not in the ways he meant. One look at Jordan's hard body and wicked smile made Kat want to rise up and follow wherever he wanted to lead, even if it was flat on her back in the hay. Did he always have that effect on women? Maybe he did. Maybe he was just born with it. She suddenly wondered what he was like as a child. I bet you were a terror on the playground when you were younger, running around teasing girls. He shrugged. Not really. I was more of a quiet kid. And did your teachers buy that whole quiet little angel act? He pushed off the door frame, walking toward her. I never said anything about being an angel. The mini donkey shied away, scrambling back into his stall. Hey, Kat called after him. You're okay, little guy. She rose and followed him, bending down to run her hands over his back in a long, comforting stroke. What do you think of his name? Waffles, huh? Does that work for you? He nuzzled her hand. Apparently it did. He's afraid of me, Jordan said a few feet away. Most animals don't seem to like me. She turned and stood. Have you tried to make friends? Usually they're just wary of people who aren't interested. People who hold the fate of the animals in their hand. If a person has no interest, then they aren't interested in what happens to them, and that's a scary place to be if you're an animal. Jordan studied her from beneath the dark, thick lashes. I saw you with that crow the other day. A nervous zip of energy shot through her. She wondered if he was going to bring that up. That's Edgar. He's wild, but he's friendly. How did you manage to befriend a wild bird? Magic, Kat said lightly. And Cheerios. That's how it all began. I fed him Cheerios. And he followed me everywhere I went after that. It was insta-love. Sometimes that's just how it goes. You know what I mean? Jordan nodded. No, that one word was rich with suppressed humor, but his gaze lowered to her mouth. Something in the air shifted between them. Kat grew very still. It was the same feeling she got when she stood near a wild animal, as if something strong, wild, and free was hovering just beyond her reach, and if she was very careful, it might come close enough for her to touch. She took a calming breath and tried to shake that feeling. So yeah, that's how I made friends with Edgar. You should try it sometime. He lifted a brow. Magic? No, she said with a laugh. Attention and treats. She pointed to Waffle, who was now peering around the corner of his stall. You never know what kind of friendship will bloom if you just show a little interest. Some have lived their whole life neglected and unwanted. It doesn't take much to win them over with a little bit of kindness. All the easygoing humor fled from Jordan's expression until Kat could no longer detect anything but polite indifference, and she thought she was good at hiding her feelings. Dinner's in an hour. Without another word, he turned and walked away. Kat watched him go and then glanced at Waffles, who stopped cowering in his stall once the coast was clear. Was it something I said? The mini donkey stepped closer, rubbing his fuzzy head against her arm. Page 44. She scratched him behind the ears. You know what? Who cares? I'm going to have cornflake casserole for dinner, and I'm determined to enjoy it myself. Waffles made a snuffling sound of encouragement. Thanks, Kat whispered. I'm going to need it. Okay. I'm determined that we're going to make it through the first 50 pages tonight, so we're on page 46. Kat thought of Jordan out to dinner with Layla, the woman in the red dress, and brushed it aside. It was better that he wasn't there. At least she could relax and get to know Opal without the feeling of self-consciousness. Jordan always made her feel like he could see parts of herself she kept hidden away, the vulnerable parts, and she just didn't like it. Opal went to the fridge and pulled out a coveted plate, then chopped meat into tiny pieces, sitting it on the floor for Hank. Here you go, sweet boy. She glanced up at Cat. Leftovers from yesterday. Dogs love beef. You're spoiling him, Cat said. Take a seat at the table. If you're not careful, you're going to have a new best friend. I should be so lucky. I've always said this house needed more pets, a cat at the very least. In my old house I had 5. But that was before my dear Gerald passed away and I moved in here. Now we have got chickens and donkeys, but those barns are barn animals. It's not like all the same sweet dog or cat that can curl up next to you on a sofa. She sat in a chair opposite a cat. Every house needs a good pet or two. Or 10, Cat said. The more the merrier. I wholeheartedly agree. Dogs and cats are potato chips. You can never have just one. Page 47. Cat suddenly sat up straighter. Opal, would you like a cat just for a little while? There's a pregnant feline at the animal shelter with no place to go. You could be a volunteer if you like, just for a few weeks until the kittens are ready for new homes. I don't think she'll be much trouble. She'd probably just hide and sleep a lot. A cat? Kittens? Opal paused, staring at the wall. She seemed far away, immersed in an old memory, but was it a good memory? Cat hoped so. Yes, Opal said. I think that would be lovely. Bring her to me. I'll take good care of her. I'm happy to be a volunteer at your shelter, too. She handed Cat a napkin. Put my name on that list. Cat felt a surge of gratitude for the old woman. Now, I sure hope you like cheesy potato crunch casserole. Sounds delicious, and even if it wasn't, Cat would eat it with enthusiasm. It was the least she could do, considering how much Opal was willing to help with Clementine. A few minutes later, Cat found out that the cheesy potato crunch casserole was sublime. It was the epitome of comfort food, like a cross between homemade mac and cheese and scalloped potatoes, with cornflakes thrown in for extra crunch. Cornflakes, who knew? Cat said in bliss. I think I need this to get this recipe. Opal dished out another scoop onto Cat's plate. I can't even talk now. Blah, blah, blah. Getting tongue-tied. I'm so happy that you like it. It's impossible to get Jordan to sit still for dinner. He's always running out the door, preferring not to stay home unless absolutely necessary. But then he was like that as a boy, too. He never stayed home. Cat would have killed to have a home where she belonged, especially if it came with a grandmother who cooked cornflake casserole. I remember thinking he was too quiet, always alone, out wandering in the fields, staring off at the horizon. A boy needs more than just chickens to keep him company, but I blame his parents. My son was completely irresponsible in all things, and he found his match in Jordan's mother, scattered-brained dreamers who preferred partying over the important stuff. She shook her head sadly. Every pot has a lid, I guess. Cat wondered what she must have been like, or rather, what the kind of parents they were to Jordan. She didn't want to pry, but instead she said, How long have you lived in this house? Opal poured more lemonade into their glasses. Over 1 year now. Jordan's father asked me to come in out here to help on the farm. I agreed because I was lonely after my husband died, but it was a dumb idea to move at my age. I can't do much around the farm anymore, and I knew it was the only matter of time before they took all over and left me behind in all this. She shook her head. Never could stick to anything they started. I think they just invited me here to be someone to help clean up after them and after they took off. Where did they go? Cat asked. The back door to the kitchen suddenly opened before Opal could answer. Jordan walked in with grocery bags. There you are, Opal said. Come in and have a seat, Jordan. I'm fine, Grandma. He set the bags on the kitchen counter and began putting away the groceries. We saved you some of my signature casserole for you. I'm not hungry, he said, turning around, but it's still hot. Opal began to rise. Let me get you a plate. No, Jordan said in annoyance. He seemed to check himself. No, he repeated politely. Thanks, but I'm just going to eat leftovers I brought home yesterday. Cat looked at Hank's empty dish with dismay. He was curled up underneath the table, under his feet, snoring. The dog ate it, Opal said brightly. You'll have to eat a casserole. Jordan slowly turned up from the cupboard. What dog? Showtime! Cat pressed her lips together and pushed the casserole plate on with her fork. The sweetie little dog you've ever seen, Opal said, pointing happily at Hank. There he is, the little angel. Cat stole a glance from Jordan underneath her lashes. He was frowning at Hank, who was oblivious. You gave my leftover filet mignon to a dog? Well, dogs love beef, Opal said. Besides, I thank Grandma, Jordan said flatly. Why is there a dog in this house? He's my dog, Cat said, lifting her chin. If you don't want him in here, then I can take him outside. You never said anything about having a dog, Jordan accused. You're here to take care of animals. Bringing more animals here wasn't part of the deal. Kat slowly rose from her chair. She expected to have more time before she introduced her dog to them, but it was too late now. Where she went, Hank followed. It was non-negotiable. She arranged her features into a blank look of surprise. I thought you knew I had a small dog. How would I know that? Jordan's expression darkened. He was glowering. Yep, that was definitely a glower. I'm sorry, Kat blustered, knowing it was Hank's future on the line, and therefore her own. I could have sworn we discussed that. We didn't. She gritted her teeth and stared down at him. It's not like there isn't enough room for a tiny dog who barely weighs 5 pounds. A dog wasn't part of the agreement, Jordan continued. It's not the size that matters. Kat gave him a sideways glance. You seem pretty knowledgeable on that subject. There was a long pause. Uh-oh, maybe she'd gone too far. Jordan's mouth twitched. Any dog, large or small, is unwanted here. I beg to differ, honey boy, Opal said in a voice that brooked no argument. I am pleased as punch to have Hank around this house. Kat and I both vote for Hank, which means you're outnumbered 2-1. Excuse me. With that, Opal picked up her plate, walked to the kitchen sink. Jordan was still glowering at Kate. Why do I keep wanting to call her Kate? It's Kat. She crossed her arms and mouthed, honey boy. It was deliberately sassy, but she didn't care. He deserved it. Hank was part of her family. If Jordan didn't approve of her dog, then he didn't approve of her. Before she had a chance to say any more, he stalked out of that kitchen. Okay, well, this is a small part. Let's see if we can't get at least into the page of 60. Because there's over 300 pages to this book. So here's 56 and 57. Jordan Prescott came through the front door looking tall, dark, and disgruntled, nothing new, and carrying a cylindrical green mesh container. He took a curious... I'll say it in a minute. He took a curiousy glance at the small office and set container on the reception desk. From my grandmother. Kat peered into the mesh cage. There was a small box on the bottom with a dish inserted into it. On the disc, it appeared to be several dark blobs. What is this? Orphans. Kat frowned. I don't understand. He sighed and rubbed a hand across the back of his neck. Even though he seemed tired, humor lit his face, and he looked like he was trying not to smile. My grandmother went to the community center today for her quilting club. Or was it crochet? He shook his head. I can't keep it straight. Anyway, one of her friends was trying to give this away. It's from a preschool class, and the teacher wasn't able to continue the science lesson or something. Kat tried to follow, but she just still didn't understand why Jordan was bringing her what appeared to be cocoons. So, your grandmother wanted me to have them? No, he said, not you specifically. She just wanted me to drop this off at the animal shelter. These cocoons are supposed to turn into butterflies, but they haven't hatched, or whatever you call it. But why bring them here? Kat asked. You guys take unwanted creatures, don't you? Yes, but I can't, she sputtered, shaking her head. We take animals like cats and dogs. Ah, Jordan said and held up a finger. And chickens, if I recall. She rolled her eyes and pushed the cage toward him. Don't give me butterflies. We can't take them. Sure you can. He backpedaled toward the door and pointing at the cage. You just did. Kat shot out of her chair, gripping the green handle. What am I supposed to do with these? This is an animal shelter, not a bug shelter. Jordan was grinning now as he pushed the door open. Don't be so discriminatory. They're poor, sad orphans, remember? I'm sure you can think of something. We deal with animals, she called out in frustration, the furry kind, but he was already too far across the parking lot to hear her. Kat flew out of breath and sat down hard in her chair. He was so frustrating. Yeah, that was the word. And there was something about the way he walked and bugged her, too. All that sexy ease of confidence as if everything was going according to his grand plans. She gritted her teeth in determination. Well, she had some plans of her own. Fine, Jordan Prescott, she said as he drove away. I see your cage full of butterflies, and I raise you one very pregnant, soon-to-be litter of kittens. With a cat. Oh boy. Let me have a sip of tea. Because on page 60 it goes for a while. As you can see, I do love this book. Okay. And yes, it's tea. And sweet. I don't drink sweet. Anyway. We're going to try giving it our best shot. I'm going to try and cover most of this book with you tonight because I don't know how I'm going to do the rest of this week yet. So, bear with me. Glasses are up. Book is closed. I'll have a headache later, I know. The front door opened, then closed. A few moments later, Jordan breezed into the kitchen, heading for the fridge. Kat blinked. He looked so different. Before, he always been wearing jeans and old flannels, casual clothes. But tonight he was wearing slacks and a dress shirt. His hair wasn't as windblown as it usually was either, and the faint scent of aftershave hung in the air. If she didn't know any better, she'd say he looked like he just came home from meeting or a dinner date. He paused when he saw her. He seemed almost surprised, as if he'd forgotten that she would show up from time to time. "Get used to it, Mr. Mysterious. I live here now, too," is what she was thinking. "How are the orphans?" he asked casually, opening the fridge. She set her sandwich down and picked up her tea. "You mean the cocoons that you forced on me?" "Oh, come on, Miss Davenport," he said, searching inside the fridge. "There's soon to be butterflies. Where's your sense of optimism?" He selected a beer and leftover deli sandwich. "I'm plenty optimistic," Kat said, lifting her chin. "But I told you the Daisy Meadow Pet Rescue doesn't take insects." "What do you have against butterflies?" he asked. "Nothing. She actually loved butterflies. They were especially important to the environment. In fact, she was already sort of enamored with her cocoons and felt responsible for their well-being. What she didn't like was the way he breezed into her place of business, dumped them on her, and left without so much as a backward glance. Jordan Prescott was too arrogant for his own good." "Wait, let me guess." He took a seat at the kitchen table. "You hate color, and butterflies are too colorful for you." Kat frowned. "I don't hate color." His gaze traveled over her black shirt. He even tipped his head sideways so he could see her black shirt and boots under the table. Then he gave her a look that drove his point home. "I like colors just fine," Kat said, yanking on the hem of her shirt. She crossed her feet under the table and sat up straighter. Leave it to him to point out that all she ever wore was black. He opened the beer. "If you say so." That was page 60. We're on 61. She shook her head and took a sip of tea. Part of her wanted to explain why her entire wardrobe was black, but then he might wonder why she hadn't bought anything new. And if that came up to conclusion that she was broke, he might feel sorry for her. That was the worst. Kat would rather eat glass than have someone like Jordan Prescott pity her. She didn't need anyone's pity, the least of all his. Jordan took a bite of his sandwich and relaxed back into the chair. He seemed completely at ease in the quiet kitchen, which was the exact opposite of how Kat felt at the moment. She glanced into her teacup. It was just easier not to look at him. A breeze swirled in through the open kitchen window, and the faint sound of crickets could be heard outside. She searched for something to fill the silence. "Why are you all dressed up?" "Dinner date," he said, taking another bite of his sandwich. Kat suddenly thought about a pretty woman named Layla that she met for the first day, and the one that had the tailored dress and the sleek stilettos. And yet, here you sit, eating dinner, she pointed. He shrugged. "Second dinner." Kat studied him from beneath the lashes. "Must have been quite the day." "Why do you say that?" "Either it went very badly or it went very well." She turned her attention back to the sandwich. "And you think this because you either had such a terrible time that you left before dinner arrived," or she paused, searched for a delicious way to say what she was thinking, "or you skipped dinner altogether and went straight to dessert." "Dessert." His face was lit with amusement and something darker, sexier. Kat felt his cheeks grow hot. "Is that what they're calling it these days?" he murmured. She ate another bite of her sandwich, ignoring him. "You have quite the imagination, Miss Davenport." Will you please stop calling me that? She asked irritably. Sure, Cat. He gave her a sensual half-smile, the one that made Queen of Impulsive Decisions grab a couple of butterflies and start doing a fan dance. Cat concentrated on stirring her tea. Why did you move here? He said suddenly. On page 63. Cat gripped her teacup and then took a slow breath. She hated personal questions like this. They always led up to inevitable questions about family. Usually she made up something vague and acceptable, but for this reason she didn't feel up to it. My job ended. I thought this really seemed like a nice place. Really, this island. Of course, Cat said. Glad to speak the simple truth. The moment I saw it, I fell in love. What's not to like? It's peaceful, it's beautiful. Life just seems quieter here, less hectic than L.A., that's for sure. So, you're from California? Yeah. She needed to think fast. In her experience, it was easy to deflect personal questions by asking her own. Did you grow up here? Yes, Jordan set his sandwich down and picked up his drink, but I left as soon as I finished high school. Why? He stared at the wall, his expression hard to read. Cat had sudden feelings that he was a million miles away. Why not? He said, before taking a drink. Okay, fine. They both had stories neither of them wanted to share. Even though she was genuinely curious, it was better this way, keeping things nice and light. She finished her sandwich and rose from her chair. There's no cable in your room, he said. She paused at her plate with one hand. What? For television. He was looking at one of the condiment jars, not making eye contact. Oh, it's all right, Cat said. I don't have a TV anyway. She walked to the sink and began washing her dishes. After drying them and putting them away, she leaned against the counter and folded her arms. The silence stretched out between them. You can use the TV in the living room, he said, if you want. That was unexpected. If she didn't know any better, she'd say that he was trying to be nice. Thanks. Cat shifted on her feet and then gave an awkward silence. Good night. You sure you don't want dessert before you go? He asked. She glanced sharply at him. He pointed to the fridge, his expression carefully neutral. The ice cream is in the freezer, or maybe you don't like dessert. She almost missed the flash of laughter in his eyes. He was teasing her again. Two could play that game. Oh, I love dessert. Lots and lots. Especially ice cream. I just lap it right up. She walked to the kitchen door and opened it up. But I like to save dessert for special occasions, and since there's nothing here worth celebrating, she gave a little wave and stepped out the door, shutting it firmly behind her. A deep masculine laugh floated through the kitchen window, following her across the lawn. It was such a warm, pleasing sound that Cat slowed her steps to listen further. Later, after she stretched out on the reclining chair, she could still hear the warm echo of the laughter in her mind, as if she drifted off to sleep. Okay. Page 65. We're down here. Cat's phone rang, and she dug for it in the reclining cushions. Hello? You're coming on Friday night, right? Juliet's voice pipped up over on the other end. Emma and Hunter are back from Hawaii, and we're going to celebrate with our official movie night. Of course I'll come, Cat said. She liked Emma as much as Juliet, and even though she knew very little of Hunter, she liked him just on principle because he made Emma so happy. Do you want me to bring anything? She had to ask, but secretly hoping Juliet would say no. Money was going to be tight until payday, and even after that she'd have to be extremely careful until she could replenish her savings account. Don't bring a thing. There's going to be enough food to feed an army. Logan's making my favorite vegetarian lasagna. Cat didn't miss a note of happiness in Juliet's voice when she mentioned her fiancé. Juliet and her childhood crush, Logan O'Connor, had recently become engaged, and he was smitten with Juliet as she was smitten with him. Won't I be a fifth wheel? Cat asked. You sure you guys don't want to have just a couple's night? Hells to the no, Juliet said. First of all, you won't be a fifth wheel because you're bringing Hank. Second of all, we have a movie night of all time, and it's always totally casual. Emma insists that you come, and I totally agree 100%. Besides, she's usually making a double batch of cupcakes, and if you don't come, I'm going to be forced to eat most of them myself. And that would be a problem, because... Good point, Juliet said, but you're still coming, and that's final. Once again, Cat felt the surge of warmth and gratitude for her friend. Something about the way Juliet and her cousin Emma included her into their circle of friends made Cat begin to hope. She never really felt like she belonged anywhere, but maybe this time, maybe for the first time, Cat would find a place that she could truly call home. Well, we're going to stop there for tonight. I'm going to hope that I can finish this book for you by tomorrow night. Well, I wouldn't say tomorrow night because look at how many pages I got marked. Well, I'm going to try and get this book for you read before Sunday. So that's my game plan. But stopping at page 70 tonight. See y'all again tomorrow, hopefully. Good night. God bless. Wash your hands. Keep your social distance.